Good evening. I'm Bill Peach, and the program is This Day Tonight. We're up against some pretty stiff competition, like The Man from U.N.C.L.E., which I guess makes me the man from Auntie. But apart from a cold, which Huey has kindly sent down to me this night, we've had some congratulatory telegrams. Congratulatory. And I'll just give you a selection of these. One from Arthur Ryler. My teenage daughter and I are watching with interest. Please don't disappoint us. We'll try. From Miracle Margarine. We'll buy the whole 30 minutes. And one from Dr. Darling, chairman of the ABC. You have nothing to fear but fear itself. The Prime Minister, Mr. Holt, returned today from a 13-day tour which has taken him to 5 Asian countries. Mr. Holt himself has said he's delighted by the success of his visit. Well, in Canberra are two political correspondents who accompanied him on his tour of Asia, Alan Ramsey of The Australian and John Bennett of the Melbourne Age. Later tonight, we'll be hearing what they thought about his tour. In Australia, public and private competition, or enterprise, are in competition in many fields, to, for instance, airlines and television. We're going to look at two very concrete examples of this rivalry, though, in Sydney. They're the two tallest buildings in the country. One of them, Australia Square, has just reached its top floor, and the other one is the State Office Block. This morning, 40 removal trucks began the big shift from the old state offices to the new block. Well, our reporters scaled the two buildings for this story on private versus public one-upmanship.
This is Gerald Stone reporting to you from the top of Australia's highest building, Australia Square in downtown Sydney.
This is Gordon Bick reporting to you from the second highest building in Australia, the State Office Block, 34 stories high. What's it like up there in the clouds? Do you need any oxygen?
Hello, Gordon. How are things down there?
We may not be as big as you, but we're certainly practical.
What's that you say? I can't hear you.
I can't hear you either. Can you speak up a bit?
I say you sure look small down there.
Anything you can do. Well, maybe not quite.
The Australia Square Tower will open officially in early 1968, rising 50 floors, almost 600 feet. It has consumed 9,000 truckloads of concrete. The plaza outside already has become a popular lunchtime meeting place for city office workers. I wouldn't want to admit this to Gordon, but I've always been skeptical of round buildings, ever since the Leaning Tower of Pisa. But inside, you would hardly know it's round. The owners say the design offers more usable office space, 11,000 square feet of floor, than the traditional boxes. If all the lifts worked at once, they could carry more than 350 people, the equivalent of 5 double-decker bus loads at the same time. Room at the top comes dear, about $8 a square foot, $88,000 a year for the entire floor. The building was designed by Harry Seidler and built by Lend-Lease Development. The manager is Mr. Alan Woodruff. Do businessmen think there's any prestige in having offices in the country's highest building?
Well, it's certainly no disadvantage. I think people like to be in a tall building. It takes them up away from the traffic noise. It brings them up where they enjoy incomparable views. And of course, it's very nice to say that you are in the tallest building in Australia.
And what would you do if somebody else built a taller building? Do you think you'd try to add a few more floors to this building?
No, I don't think we would at all. I don't think we could. And I don't think there's any doubt about it that one day somebody will build a taller building than Australia Square, and then somebody will build a taller building that they've built, and so on, because these things go on from year to year. But I think Australia Square, as the first of the giants, shall we say, of this type, offering all these facilities and features, I think it will always, from now on, have a place in the hearts of the people of Sydney.
Here at the 420-foot-high State Office Block, we have a very practical building. Why, even the fountain is not just an ornament to beautify, it's put to practical use as part of the building's cooling system. The $14 million building was scheduled to open last year. This week, workers from 6 government departments are moving in. Already, officials of the Public Service Association are claiming that the building is not big enough for the 2,300 workers. The Department of Public Works, Agriculture, Mines, Local Government, Premiers and Treasury will move into the 263,000 square feet of office space. Maybe not as impressive as a revolving restaurant, but this canteen will be capable of serving thousands of meals a day, and those ministerial cups of tea. Was Mr. Edward Farmer, the government architect, more interested in practicality than prestige?
Oh yes, indeed. We, as far as the exterior finishes are concerned, we used materials which would last well and used a minimum of maintenance, and also which would give dignity to such a building as this is. That we wanted to get away from the look of many commercial buildings, which we didn't think were compatible with the dignity of the Premier and of government departments such as shall be housed in this building.
Now, you haven't got any revolving restaurants or anything like that, which the Australia Square has.
No, we've always regarded this building as a purely utilitarian office building, and at one stage there was considerable pressure to install a revolving restaurant on the roof, but I must confess I was very much against it, because this is after all a working building.
We've got 18 passenger lifts. 1-8. How about you? We can't quite match you there. We've got 16. 1-6 lifts. We have the biggest revolving restaurant in the world. Who wants to get giddy while you eat your soup anyway? I prefer our super stainless steel fully equipped kitchen and cafeteria. We've got tapestries specially woven in France. Je ne parle pas français.
Well, Con Vandenover is a steel worker who's worked right to the top of both buildings, now at the top of Australia Square. Which did you like better, Con?
Well, the building working on the present is much better as the Black Stump, what we call it over there, the State Office Block, because things are much safer first and highly organized, and the whole is much better to work on here, you know. Our reporters were Gerald Stone at Australia Square and Gordon Bick at the State Office Block. I suppose it's not surprising that Australia Square is already known around town as the Silo and the State Office Block as the Black Stump. Australians just have no reverence for the higher things of life. Now here's Frank Bennett.
The Prime Minister's 13-day whistle-stop tour through 5 Asian nations covered countries as varied as their political leaders. The jumping-off point was Singapore, the Asian marketplace run by westernized Lee Kuan Yew. Cambodia, where Prince Sihanouk plots a course between East and West. to war-torn Laos, where Prince Suvarnabhumi grapples with the rebellious Pathet Lao. On to nationalist China's aging Chiang Kai-shek in Taiwan, where Australia is to post an ambassador. And ending up with President Park Chung-hee of South Korea, a country also committed militarily in Vietnam. This was a highly personalized mission by Mr. Harold Holt, accompanied by his wife and a small army of journalists. Two of them are at present in Canberra, Alan Ramsey of the Australian, John Bennetts of The Age. John, to you first of all. Mr. Holt said this morning on his arrival home that his tour was a great success. Would you agree with him?
I think he's entitled to claim that, Frank. He's visited 4 countries in Asia which he's never been to before. He's seen it firsthand, the countryside, the industries, the development. He's met the leaders, including leaders of 2 countries which don't agree with our basic policies on Vietnam and the American alliance. This is all worthwhile.
What about you, Alan?
Yes, this is right. Mr. Holt has said publicly there was no hostility, and there was none. I think he just does very well in the personal diplomacy.
Alan, was Mr. Holt's approach and attitude consistent in each of the countries he went to?
Yes, it was. There was no switching hats. He maintained his posture throughout, and of course he was helped by the fact that the countries he visited, the leaders he saw, were very anxious to make a good impression, and they did.
What about Cambodia, for example, where our policy of being allied to the American way of thinking would not go down very well?
No, but we have a very special relationship with Cambodia. We've one of the Western countries that apparently managed to get on there, even if the Americans don't, and where we disagree, we have agreed to disagree.
And John, for example, in Formosa, our trade relations with Communist China wouldn't be a very easy hurdle for Mr. Holt to jump over in his talks with Chiang Kai-shek.
Yes, but I think the Chinese had explored that before he got there, Frank. I think they knew that there was no likelihood of them persuading Australia out of trading with Communist China, nor was there any likelihood of them persuading Australia to reverse the decision to recognise the People's Republic of Mongolia. And the Chinese, being realistic, didn't back a loser. They just left those subjects alone and talked about other things where they thought they could make some mileage, like trade between Taiwan and Australia. They talked about the possibility of importing Australian bauxite to be processed in an aluminium plant, which the Prime Minister inspected while he was there.
How genuine were the crowds that we saw in the news clips, particularly in the last few days in South Korea? Lots of school children were out on the streets. Was this some kind of enforced welcome?
Enforced, perhaps. I think the children were all given time off, and they were told by their teachers they had to be there. And for 10 miles of the route, there were just thousands and thousands of children. I heard one official estimate that there were about 300,000 children. But there were also a couple of 100,000, I suppose, adult Koreans who looked perfectly happy to be there. They had big smiles on their faces. They were waving Australian flags. They knew whom they were greeting, the Australian Prime Minister, and they were obviously glad to see him. So even if you're cynical and say this was largely a stage-managed welcome, much remains to be explained only in terms of genuine goodwill to Australia.
And Alan, Mr. Holt's personalised diplomacy idea, do you think it's going to work in Asia, really?
Yes, he gets across to these people very well, like he gets across home here in Australia. He's has this particular personality where he's very, very likeable, and he doesn't seem to put a foot wrong when he in his talks with these people.
Mm. And just before you both go, what about a quick, short anecdote in a personal sense about the trip?
Yes. One that comes to mind, I think, illustrates this point about Korean attitudes to Australia. Mr. Hong, the Minister for Information, entertained the press party that was travelling with our Prime Minister. And Mr. Hong's a pretty hard-headed politician, but he was quite obviously moved when he recalled Australian association with Koreans in their war. I remember him saying at one stage, 281 Australians are buried here in the soil of my country, and there were almost tears in his eyes when he talked about it. And he himself had fought as an artillery officer, and he claimed that he survived and his unit survived simply because of the close support given by Australian air units, so close that he himself had been shot twice accidentally by Australian bullets, but he bore us no ill will because of that.
John Bennetts and Alan Ramsey, thank you very much. Now back to Bill Peach.
Bang! And he rattles the pickets behind square leg. A jolly good shot, sir. That brings up the century. cricket, Oscar Wilde said he wouldn't play cricket because of the indecent postures it forced him to assume. But he was way out of step. Cricket, damn it, is what made the Empire great. Look at the names on this bat. Hutton, Bradman, McCabe. This was the 1938 Test series, in which Dan McCabe saved the day for Australia in the 4th Test by scoring 232 runs in just under 4 hours. But now, of course, the Empire is dead, and some people are saying cricket is dead too. Wisden's, the cricketer's Bible, has come out in its latest edition saying that the standard of first-class cricket in England has never been lower. Well, we in Australia haven't got that much to boast about either, having just lost to South Africa and New Zealand for the first time. Over now to Gerald Lyons at the Bushfire Appeal Test on the Melbourne Cricket Ground today.
Well, they've livened up a bit out there now, anyway.
Yes, they have.
What do you think of these reports about cricket being dead?
Well, I don't think this is true. I admitted the results in South Africa and again in New Zealand perhaps haven't been as what we would have liked, but I don't think that there's a great deal wrong with Australian cricket. The attendances seem to be coming back in the game. In the Sheffield Shield last year, I think most games were well attended. And this is a good thing, and perhaps what we do need probably is another real personality in the game, and I think the crowds will still flock back, and cricket will still maintain its place as it is one of the top sports in Australia.
Were you very concerned the side which toured New Zealand, of which you were captain, it was called by a London cricket writer the worst international side in history?
Well, under the conditions, we were beaten by a side which had the players to take advantage of the conditions which the games were played under. But in the only game at the tour at Christchurch, where the wicket was a little bit like Australia, we performed fairly well, and if it hadn't rained, we'd have won this particular test match.
Well, there have been more reports than ever recently about cricket being in eclipse and cricket dying and cricket being malnourished, suffering from malnutrition anyway. What do you think about this, Ian?
Well, I think these same things have been said for probably the last 100 years. I think, however, there's some grounds for saying that Australia is very much down at the moment. Our cricket has fallen off over the last few years, but I think this is a phase we're going through, and I should certainly have been far more worried about it had I not seen the Sheffield Shield matches played on the Melbourne ground this year. I was quite enervated by them. The cricket was absolutely first class, and it's indicated that we do have the young players with that flair which attracts the public, and who will, I'm sure, in the next few years bring us back to the top and the position we occupied a few years ago.
What about attendances here? You're very happy with those, for instance, on Sunday, I believe you only had an attendance of 14,000, which isn't very many in a big ground like this.
No, that was a disappointing crowd, but I think that there were circumstances that were the cause rather than the cricket. After all, the game was at a most uninteresting spot on Saturday night. I think, too, that the weather yesterday was very threatening. It was quite cold. It looked like rain. And I think these things added up to affect the attendance yesterday.
Usually when one goes back over the years and thinks of cricket, one thinks of not so much of games one has seen, but of the great champions of the past. Do you think perhaps this is what's wrong with cricket today, if anything is wrong with it, that we haven't got the flashing champions that we once had, the great personalities of the game?
Yes, I think this is unquestionably the great fault today. But it's a lacking of distinct personalities which at this particular stage is affecting the appeal of the cricket to the public. But this is purely a transitory business, and I think you'll find that in another 2 or 3 years, when Sheehan, Davies and these boys develop and blossom to the full, the cricket will be just as attractive as ever, because after all, it's only 5 or 6 years, which is not a very long time ago, that there were 91,000 people came along to see the West Indies play, 91,000 in one day, which is a world record. Well, the people haven't changed all that much in 5 or 6 years. If you can produce your personalities, and we are going to have them in another year or two, you will still get the people coming. And our most interesting season is going to be the one in the year after next, when we have the West Indies out here again, and I'm quite certain you'll find in that time that you'll have your Sheehan, you'll have your Walters, you'll have your Davies in the test side, and with the West Indies you'll find that the interest will be just as great as ever it's been.
And now from cricket watchers to China watchers. An article in a Sydney newspaper yesterday suggested that the Chinese leader, Chairman Mao Zedong, may be dead. Mr. Hao Jian-Chu is an expert on China and a lecturer in Oriental Studies at Melbourne University. Mr. Chu, what do you think of this suggestion that Chairman Mao may be dead?
For this, I will show you an issue of the People's Daily published in Beijing. Here is the People's Daily of March the 13th of this year, in which a picture shows Chairman Mao Zedong receiving Mr. Wilcox of New Zealand. In the middle of the picture, you will see Mr. Wilcox and Chairman Mao Zedong. Now, if Chairman Mao Zedong were dead, then what useful purpose will be served by a double, as the speculation goes, receiving Mr. Wilcox, a seasoned observer who has visited Communist China several times? Is Mr. Wilcox so stupid as not to discover the double, or he is so, cooperative as not to disclose the fake? There is no reason to think whatsoever that Mr. Wilcox is either so stupid nor so cooperative. Therefore, I must say the one he saw on March the 12th of this year must be Chairman Mao Zedong himself. Chairman Mao is very much alive, although he may be mentally failing.
The newspaper article also mentioned that Chairman Mao hasn't been heard speaking in public for a couple of years. What significance do you attach to this?
I asked the same question to Mr. Ted Hill the other day, and his answer was that Chairman Mao is an old man. He is 74 years old now, and he simply doesn't want to speak.
Mr. Chu, thank you very much.
Reporter was Brian King. Well, British fortunes may have declined in cricket, but they're riding high in the film world. At the presentation of tonight, American time, of the Academy Awards at Santa Monica Civic Auditorium, British stars are hot favourites to take out the top awards. Paul Scofield has been nominated as the Best Actor for his part in the film A Man for All Seasons, which is also nominated as the Best Film. Here's a scene from that film showing Paul Scofield as Sir Thomas More and Orson Welles as Cardinal Wolsey. Sir Thomas More has refused to make it easy for Henry VIII to marry yet another wife.
Let the dynasty die with Henry VIII and we'll have dynastic wars again. Blood-witted barons ramping the country from end to end. Is that what you want? Very well. England needs an heir. Certain measures, perhaps regrettable, perhaps not. There's much in the church which needs reformation, Thomas. All right, regrettable, but necessary to get us an heir. Now, explain how you, as a Councillor of England, can obstruct these measures for the sake of your own private conscience.
Well, I think that when statesmen forsake their own private conscience for the sake of their public duties, they lead their country by a short route to chaos. And we shall have my prayers to fall back on.
You'd like that, wouldn't you? To govern the country with prayers.
Yes, I should.
I'd like to be there when you try.
In 1942, Joan Fontaine won the Best Actress award from her sister, Olivia de Havilland, which started off a notorious feud between those two. Well, tonight again, for the first time in 25 years, two sisters are vying for the award. Lynn Redgrave for her role in Georgie Girl, and Vanessa Redgrave for her part in Morgan, where she's cast as the better-class bride of a young artist who's decided, after careful consideration, that he's a gorilla. In this scene, Morgan deals with Vanessa Redgrave's attempt to get started with a new boyfriend.
Poor Morgan. He's going to a psychiatrist.
I'm all for that.
Of course, it could be a way of blackmailing me.
Look, must we discuss him at this point? We've done nothing else all the evening.
Oh, Charles.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition. Go, baby, go, and in. Bring it. Go ahead. Hey, altitude a little bit over 3,000 feet. Speed a little over 200 miles per hour.
That's what's known as an explosive report, or a story with a bang. Australia has an interest in the awards for the best film song with Georgie Girl, the hit record from the Seekers. But another hot favourite is the song from Alfie, which doesn't actually come into the film, but the music is heard over the end titles. Here it is from Laurel Lee.
What's it all about, Alfie? Is it just for the moment we live? What's it all about when you thought it out, Alfie? Are we meant to take more than we or are we meant to be kind? And if only fools are kind, Alfie, then I guess it is wise to be cruel. And if life belongs only to the strong, Alfie, what will you lend on an old golden rule? As sure as I believe there's a heaven above, Alfie, I know there's something much more, something even non-believers can believe in. I believe in love, Alfie. Without true love we just exist, Alfie, until you find the love you've missed. You're nothing, Alfie. When you walk, let your heart lead the way, and you'll find love any day, Alfie.
Laurel Lee with the song from Alfie. Wow. Well, until tomorrow night, just a minute, here's a late message just to hand. Our reporter at Australia Square, Gerald Stone, claims he's now found an even more interesting building. All right, let's see it.
Sydney's big crime wave, well, the police aren't taking it sitting down. Here in the heart of King's Cross, they've erected an elaborate trap for cat burglars. A false building. It looks like a regular apartment house from the outside, but it's really just a facade, like a Hollywood movie set. It's rumored, and police won't confirm it, of course, that 4 burglars have fallen to their deaths in the last 6 months. You notice we're filming by daylight when burglars aren't around. Our resident criminologist and stuntman, Bob Ellis, shows how the burglar trap works. Bob joined this day tonight from Long Bay. He is doing this experiment at no mean risk to his life. Notice the cunning texture work of the false brick. Well, that's it. Thank you, Bob. Bob? Bob? Whoops.